Some games seem to go on forever, and some games are over in a pinch. While many AAA developers tout the extreme length of playtime in their newest games, what matters more than the hours clocked in is the hours actually enjoyed. Whether you'd rather spend 100 hours developing a Minecraft world or just 2 hours experiencing the story of Journey, all comes down to what is valuable to you as a player. It doesn't matter if you're able to spend 50 hours in Elder Scrolls Oblivion if it isn't your cup of tea to begin with. And the intimidation of having to find that much enjoyment in a game can actually be a stressful deterrent to some players. While we all want to get our money's worth, sometimes that doesn't come down to how long we play the game for, but how full of an experience we got out of it. A perfect example of this would be the 2015 Moon Studios action platformer, Ori and the Blind Forest. Ori's adventure is meant to be a coming-of-age story of self-discovery, the likes of Lion King and the Iron Giant, which fully explains why this game feels like the interactive version of a Disney movie. The design of the game is visually inspired by the work of Studio Ghibli co-founder Hayao Miyazaki, and the aesthetics and atmosphere of this title are often cited during its overwhelmingly high score reviews. We'll figure out exactly why so many people have fawned over this short gaming experience as we discover what's so great about Ori and the Blind Forest. The first thing you notice about this game is almost certainly going to be the lighting. The developers at Moon Studios made sure you notice it as soon as you boot up the game. As we begin our new save file, we are transitioning from the gentle sunset colors and somber music to a much higher contrast stormy night, and a demonstration of the power of nature, which will set the tone for the rest of our adventure. What's important to realize, despite many tropes across movies, video games, and pretty much every form of visual media in the world, is that light and dark are not immediate indicators of good versus evil. Instead, in Ori and the Blind Forest, light has a much more poignant representation of power and life. The clashing storm at the beginning of the game is a battle of life and death, though we don't understand to what extent yet. Then, as time passes, we see the light fade from the world around, until only the light of Ori remains, the last hope for the once powerful forest. As we awaken to a world now devoid of most life, the only bright entities we come across would be the new items to help Ori along the way, or more notably, the bright enemies and harmful pieces of nature that have now assumed power in the dying forest. These fiends now hold the power, so they also possess the light. However, once Ori starts to find their way around, we start to see slight glimpses of light poking through the tree canopy above, as if with our adventure beginning, we're also seeing the potential return to power of the good in the world, as the balance of nature is restored. In keeping with the aspect of the power of nature, you may notice while playing that the environment is actually more likely to kill you than the monsters. Sure, the enemies that get in your way may land some good hits or knock you off course, but the environmental damage from the spikes, lava, falling objects, or whatever else you may traverse can send you back to your last save point in only 2 hits, regardless of your health left. In a continuation of this idea of power, life returning to the forest isn't always an immediate benefit to Ori or the player at the helm. While reviving the rotting innards of the Ginzo tree, rushing water will suddenly fill the caverns, and despite this being a good thing in the context of our adventure, the sudden aggressive return of this water is too powerful, even for Ori who just let it loose. This steamroller of nature presents a very sudden threat to anything in its way, reclaiming its rightful home. The importance and quality of lighting and color in this game doesn't just stop at the overarching themes. This whole world is so satisfyingly structured that it's exciting to see how every color of the rainbow is integrated into well-designed locales that each function as their own part of this environment. The ferocity of the red lavas, the eeriness of purple and green enemies, and the water in this game is strikingly refreshing. The music subsides into the background and you're just surrounded by soft blue light and the gentle movement of the environment. I honestly wished that more of this game were spent underwater because it was just relaxing and fun to swim around, regardless of your next objective. I spent as much time as possible exploring areas with water because, oddly enough, the design of the world was more incentivizing to stick around and explore than any reward I would actually be collecting along the way. It's very reminiscent of Little Big Planet 2 and Rayman Legends in design, but feels much more leisurely. In fact, the whole hand-drawn art style of Ori and the Blind Forest was heavily inspired by the Rayman series, except for one major difference. The art team at Moon Studios refused to reuse any patterns or assets, wanting every single screen to look like a completely unique hand-drawn section of their world. Each asset is designed for a specific location, and nothing makes a second appearance anywhere in the game. There is also very interesting use of the foreground. In the beginning of your quest, you'll see silhouettes that seem to just be creatures of the world around you. Then, once you get close to the Ginzo tree in the water vein, you'll come face to face with the creature you've been seeing this whole time. In fact, while chasing them down, you'll even catch a much clearer glimpse of this villain just out of reach in the foreground, taunting Ori for taking the long way around this unfamiliar territory. While Ori and the Blind Forest is technically classified and commonly referred to as a metroidvania game, it certainly breaks the mold in several aspects, which I think is what sets it apart as a must-play experience in competition with some other incredible and well-known titles. What stood out to me as the most notable deviation from the standard genre form is that this game leans a lot more to the puzzle platformer side than the action-adventure side in terms of metroidvania-focused gameplay. Comparatively speaking to many character designs of this genre, Ori is tiny, taking up very little real estate on the screen, and while this certainly gives the player more opportunity to enjoy the world design, in a gameplay sense, this also allows for an easy understanding of what's going on around you. Unlike Metroid or Hollow Knight, in which the main character is the focus of the screen, in this instance, the surrounding environment is the focus. The wider field of view allows for puzzles more so in the style of Celeste and the letter V 6 times, wherein your ability as a player will greatly enhance your proficiency in beating the game. This is in opposition to a game like Hollow Knight, where the only real limitations on where you can go and what you can do are a matter of which abilities you've unlocked. This pause menu is another feature of the game that sets Ori apart from many Metroidvanias, as in, it actually shows you a whole list of your powers, though locked, from the start of the game, even with little images to give you an assumption as to what some of them might do. As seems customary at this point with Metroidvania games, Ori and the Blind Forest provides excellent demonstrations for powers you've just received by preparing you in ways you aren't even seeing. Take a look at the early game power of double jumping. The area you're in and the puzzles you've just faced here have relied heavily on singular, well-timed jumps and some scaling of walls as long as they're appropriately spaced. But you'll see countless ledges and collectibles just out of reach. When you head deeper into the Moon Grotto, not paying much attention to the path you're taking, you'll eventually come across the ancestral tree of Leiru that provides you with your new ability. Then, as you head back the way you came, you're now able to fully utilize and enjoy your newfound power, collecting previously out-of-reach objects, spanning large distances that would have otherwise slowed you down, and backtracking through what you now realize to be a treacherous path had you not been given your new ability. In many Metroidvania games, it's a bit of a tradition, it seems, that the final boss is so difficult that you'll need every single collectible and upgrade out there to stand a chance, or sometimes to reach them at all. This is definitely not true for Ori and the Blind Forest. It seems almost expected for the player to finish the game without learning every ability. I certainly didn't find them all in my initial playthrough, and I'm not even sure I needed all of the abilities at my disposal in order to finish the game. This is good news for the more non-completionist-minded players out there, who don't have to go digging or retracing steps, such as in the cases where you get to a boss that you feel you're ready to take on, but are stopped by the game for having missed something. I will say that this game is surprisingly short. There wasn't by any means the promise of an experience that would last you dozens of hours, but the ending crept up on me nonetheless. It's important for any form of media not to overstay its welcome, but I was pretty disappointed in how short it was, and I wanted more of this experience. Not meaning that I felt the need to get more out of it, but I just wanted it to keep going. Either way, I accepted the length of the game and enjoyed my time, setting my controller aside and moving on. But a couple weeks later, I decided to take another look. I rarely return to games once I've beaten them, but something was telling me that there was more to enjoy from this game, without the hassle of replaying the whole thing or going through some ridiculous remaining challenge. And guess what? There was a whole area of the world I hadn't explored, as in a completely unrevealed location that ended up being about 1/10 of the total world size. I knew there were some doors I hadn't opened here and there. After all, I wasn't going for 100% completion on my initial playthrough of the game, but I expected by the time I had beaten it that I had only left a few collectibles around, maximum health boosts and that sort of thing. I didn't realize there were drastic chunks of exploration that I hadn't even touched, as well as abilities that greatly impacted the way you can get around. I mean, it's nice that the game doesn't require you to collect everything there is out there in order to beat it, but I kinda wish the developers gave themselves a little more credit. They went too easy on their players, whom I think they should have demanded more from. The world is beautiful and it's fun to traverse, so give your players more reason to spend time in each location. This game pulled me back in for a couple more hours than originally intended, and I was able to have fun just exploring and using the tools at my disposal to pick up additional collectibles despite the fact that they wouldn't serve me any purpose, as I had already beaten the game without them. But nonetheless, they were fun just to add to my collection. It was really satisfying to go back and take advantage of those abilities you gained throughout the story as well. All of a sudden, you can blow through platforming puzzles with ease. In fact, when approaching some of the ones that you had the opportunity to access with earlier skills alone, the use of some of the later game skills almost makes you feel like you were able to skip the puzzle altogether. Just as I had imagined when I picked the controller up once more, there definitely was more enjoyment to be had. But what made this additional experience with the game all the more entertaining was the fact that I wasn't returning to the game out of a need to 100% it or to finish collecting every item or power-up. I just wanted to play more, and there was more exploring and adventuring to be done, even without being dragged back in by a gaming experience that was anything less than exceptional. It's important that players get their money's worth and don't have their time wasted when trying out a new game. But in terms of the sins of video game lengths, I think an unfortunately short experience, overflowing with enjoyment, far outweighs the wide over deep approach of big games that just can't hold your interest for long enough. Ori provides its players with an experience that they may enjoy too much for it to be over, rather than overstaying its welcome beyond your attention span. But who knows, maybe you'll end up getting just the right ratio of enjoyment to playtime. After all, this game isn't abysmally short, with HowLongToBeat.com citing the main story of the game as taking around 8 hours. It's just not as long as it could have been. I encourage anyone playing this game for the first time to really take their time in exploring and enjoying the layout of the world, either between main story points or whenever you obtain new abilities that'll let you explore the world in a new way. The developers over at Moon Studios put in so much work that can easily be missed if you're not letting yourself marinate in the experience. This game controls well, provides a great, succinct story, and the lighting and colorful design make this one of those excellent games to make a night out of, just shutting yourself away, turning off all the lights, and experiencing this Disney-esque story on your own. That is what's so great about Ori and the Blind Forest. Thank you all for joining us on this episode of What's So Great About Gaming, as we discovered the world of Ori and the Blind Forest. I'd like to thank CowCondom and ElasticHedgehog for suggesting this game. Make sure to tell us what you think about Ori, or even suggest a game for another video. If you want to hear what's great about another game, check out the link to our last episode, Pokemon's First Generation, on screen or in the description. And please take the time to subscribe to be involved in the discussions here. Thanks again for watching. Now go play a great game. We'll see you next time.